Sonos has built a huge following. They are one of the most successful home audio brands ever, grossing nearly $2 billion annually. That's second only to Bose, and it is light years ahead of well-known hi-fi brands like KLIPSCH. So why am I still not sold? Let's just get one thing straight. I don't hate Sonos. I use their products almost daily because Sonos does a lot of things right, but they're also not perfect. Take, for example, the new Era 300 smart speaker. The 300 has 6 drivers, 4 tweeters, and 2 woofers arranged to give you, better stereo separation from a single speaker, not to mention the sensation of height when playing back Atmos content. Now, the Era has 6 Class D amps inside, and while Sonos is tight-lipped when it comes to things like frequency response and other specs, I'm confident the majority of their customers couldn't care less about those things. But for those curious, in our room, the 300 played down to around 40-ish hertz up to 15 kilohertz. So it's not quite full range, but it is still respectable given its size. When it comes to physical connections, the 300 doesn't have many. In fact, it only has one, a USB-C port that pulls double duty as the speaker's Ethernet and line in. So if you want to connect a source like a CD player, you need to buy Sonos's USB-C to analog adapter. If you want to listen to both CDs and have the stability of an Ethernet connection, you're going to need to use another adapter, which is also sold separately. The 300 caters to those who have given up on their old school hi-fi ways, or let's get real, never had them to begin with. The Era is full of wireless options such as Bluetooth 5.0, Wi-Fi, AirPlay 2, Alexa, voice control, as well as Sonos' own app that supports popular streaming services, including Apple Music natively. Before setting up any Sonos product, you have to download the free Sonos app, which works on both Android and iOS devices. And once you open the app and create a Sonos account, yes, they require your email and whatnot before you can enjoy your products, the app will then identify your new speaker. Using my new iPhone, the app identified our 2 Era 300 speakers, but it does not set them up as a stereo pair automatically. You have to set them up individually first, then make them a stereo pair within the app. Even with my new iPhone in hand, it took 2 attempts for the app to connect to one Era and 3 attempts the other. Both speakers were eventually able to connect to the app and my home's Wi-Fi, but that process, it just wasn't as graceful as some other smart speakers. One thing to note, if you ever want to relocate one or both of the speakers elsewhere in your home, you have to first unlink them as a pair before setting them up as individual speakers again, including assigning them to a new room. If you don't, you may be in for a very frustrating experience. And if you want to go from using them in stereo to using them as surround speakers, you have to break the bond first and then essentially reinstall them again as surrounds. When set up as surround speakers, the Eras cannot be used as Bluetooth or streaming speakers. Given how flexible the 300s look on paper, I found this aspect of their performance, or lack thereof, pretty dumb. Now, we tested the Eras a few ways, whether we used them solo on a shelf or as a stereo pair on our Kanto stands with the Sonos Sub Mini, or surround channels paired with our Beam Gen 2. Once connected and set up properly inside the app, their day-to-day livability was mostly flawless. We listened to music using Bluetooth or AirPlay from my MacBook Pro or my new iPhone, and enjoyed movies in 2.1 as well as Atmos through our Apple TV 4K and Sony X95L TV. And speaking of watching movies, either in stereo or Atmos, I found Sonos' AirPlay functionality with the Apple TV 4K to be cumbersome, specifically when it came to controlling volume, but this is likely an Apple or AirPlay thing. To control the volume of the 300s or any wireless Sonos speaker, you need to press and hold the screen icon on your Apple TV remote until the dashboard appears. From there, go to the AirPlay logo and turn off the TV speakers, which is always on by default, and then check the box next to your Sonos speaker or speaker pairing. This will now allow your Apple TV remote to control the volume. Keep in mind, every time you turn on or off your TV, you need to repeat this procedure, which is kind of silly. One thing that just continues to amaze me is just how much even diehard enthusiasts talk up Sonos' sound quality. It's not that I disagree, but any other time you use words like Bluetooth, AirPlay, lifestyle to describe a speaker, you're gonna get a different response, and it's typically not a good one. Doing quick sweeps 20 to 20 from my listening position revealed a largely neutral response. Without using TRUEPLAY, which is Sonos' auto room EQ procedure, the 300 is fairly linear. There is a boost boost in the bass between 45 and 70 Hz and some roll off at 2K before falling off around 15 kHz. Now, using TRUEPLAY evens out the bass quite a bit, but it didn't fix the gap in the response that exists around 200 Hz. To confirm this gap that wasn't a room node, I also measured the speaker at 3 feet and it was still there. Using the EQ inside the app allows you to adjust the speaker's bass and treble in a way that minimizes the gap's audible presence, but if you come away feeling that the 300s are a little boomy in the bass in a way that seems, well, disjointed from its mid-range in treble, that gap is why. On their own or as part of a stereo pair, sonically, the Era 300 is fairly impressive. I found most genres of music to sound good through them, with good intelligibility on vocals thanks to that neutral mid-range. Now, highs were detailed, though you can definitely sense the speaker's roll-off, as instruments like, say, cymbals or flutes didn't quite have the same airs I've come to expect from similarly priced smart speakers or, say, even passive ones. If you want more top-end energy and extension, KLIPSCH the 5s or 7s do a better job. Given the Era's smaller size, bass was punchy and impressive, but could be a bit one note at times, something I noted when listening to the kick drums from bands like A Perfect Circle. As an individual speaker, the 300 does a really nice job recreating a sense of space, but it really comes into its own when used as a stereo pair. In stereo, the SOUNDSTAGE is vast, possessing good width and depth and surprising height. Focus and imaging, though, it's not best in class. It has more of like a blob-like center image that is prone to floating or bunching as you move off axis. Dynamically, at least with music, the pair can play loud, easily filling our 400-plus square foot main room with distortion-free sound up and into the mid-80 dB range before Sonos' own dynamic limiters really start to kind of kick in and throttle the output. Those of you with smaller rooms will probably not run into these limiters and will likely find the 300's dynamics very exciting. Now, as surround speakers, the Era 300s are exceptional, but I wouldn't build a surround sound system using the 300s with anything but the Sonos Arc. And no, we still don't have the Arc, but we do have the Beam Gen 2, lucky you. The Eras completely overshadow the Beam and put a spotlight on the Beam's lack of true upward firing height channels. The surround sound presentation was jarring and, well, just weird, gradually bending upwards as sounds neared the back of our room rather than remaining overhead front to back. Another thing, the added spaciousness that now existed at the back of our room made the Beam seem way smaller in comparison, compressing the sound field down to like a point just right under our screen, which obviously is not ideal. It only took watching a handful of clips before I just decided I had heard enough. Given the added dynamic range of today's movies, like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Elvis, the entire Sonos system, it just lacked the power to play at theater-like levels. With the volume set to 100% inside the app, we measured 79 dB peaks when watching movies using our Sonos system. While 79 dB is still really loud, and it's going to seem louder in smaller spaces, those of you hoping to expand your existing Sonos systems have the potential to be disappointed rather than blown away. I suspect Arc owners will likely have a better experience, but I would not invest in the Eras to add surround sound capability to a Beam-based system. Quick sidebar about that Sub Mini. It is cool, and it definitely adds a touch of extra weight to both the Beam as well as the Era 300s, but it's not what I would call articulate. Its wireless range is good, and it had no problem staying connected, but it crosses over with other Sonos speakers so high that dialogue can be heard coming from the Sub when turned up. If the best place for a Sub in your room is next to or behind your listening position, like it is in our space, expect to be very annoyed by this. You can adjust the Sub's volume in the app, but not the crossover point, so if you get the Sub Mini to round out a pair of Eras, or the Beam for that matter, keep it as close to the speakers themselves as possible for better coherence top to bottom. Just know that if you do this, the subwoofer may not be in the best spot for bass in your room. As a standalone speaker or as part of a whole home audio system, you know, one that may have, say, an Era here and an Era there, I think the 300 is at its strongest. I say this because by itself, it isn't going to expose deficiencies in other lesser Sonos products, nor is it going to call attention to its own quirks. If you're considering the Eras as a stereo pair of speakers or as a soundbar replacement, they're worth a look. I thought they sounded good in stereo, but the more I listened critically, it didn't take much before I started to hear their flaws. And at almost $900 for the pair, one could potentially best them with a good, say, budget integrated and pair of bookshelf speakers. For example, Cambridge Audio's AXR85 and a pair of 600M Mark IIs from KLIPSCH. It might be a little bit more money depending on when or where you shop, but this combo is way more flexible long-term, and you still get features like Bluetooth. Now, however, when compared to speakers like Bang & Olufsen's new Biosound A5, the Era 300 is going to come across as an absolute steal. Head-to-head, the two speakers are way more evenly matched than I personally would like to admit, making the 300 the winner in terms of outright value without any arguments from me. The A5 is the better speaker, but it's going to set you back more than the cost of a pair of 300s. The A5 works better within the B&O app. It plays deeper, definitely has a greater sensation of bass out of the box, and is just more adjustable with EQ, giving you the potential for a more neutral or tunable sound. And when it comes to build quality, the Era is a good-looking speaker for sure, but it's still a Sonos through and through, whereas the A5, it is
rich.
If you want a speaker that can step in and replace a soundbar or anchor a 2.1 setup, there are other options. The KLIPSCH 7s, or the 5s if you have a smaller room, may not trounce the Sonos in terms of wireless connectivity or just that futuristic cool factor, but in every other way, they are the superior speaker. You'll get RCA phono inputs, HDMI, a built-in DAC, subwoofer output, Bluetooth, and you also get a remote. So the 5s and the 7s are definitely worth considering and cross-shopping. So back to my original question, am I now sold on the new Sonos speaker? Well, I have to say, the new Era 300 is my favorite speaker from Sonos thus far. Because it sounds great, even despite its setup quirks and fine print when it comes to its flexibility. The problem with the Era isn't its sound or its usability. It's that it represents kind of a new path for Sonos, one that is bright but doesn't seem fully realized yet. I'm sure with time, the Era will improve and get some company from other Sonos products to match its capability. But for now, it's a bit of an odd duck. Pretty talented, intriguing for sure, but still very much on the outside looking in. All right, so that's enough out of me, but before we get out of here, what did you think of the Sonos?
All right, well, before I get to that, what about the Sony HTA9?
You can do way more with the Sony. You really can. The Sony is going to give you a better surround sound presentation. It's going to do better things spatially. The only issue that I know some people have had with the Sony products is if you have a congested Wi-Fi network or you're in an area that maybe shares Wi-Fi or something like that, maybe apartments, it has some issues or has been known to have some issues. Now, we have not experienced or did not experience any of that ourselves, but I will say this, the 300s also occasionally would lose signal, but they would reacquire it just the same as the Sony. This is just kind of the thing with wireless speakers. I would still get the HTA9, though. It is more flexible and just a better overall sonic 2-channel and surround experience.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, well, I hate to do this to you, but I'm going to have to disagree with you on how I would use these.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think they are better as pairs, not as individual speakers. While I agree with you that in stereo, some of their quirks may feel a little bit more present.
Yeah.
But it's solo where I feel like they're the weakest.
Interesting. Okay.
The majority of people are very likely going to put one of these, or both of them even, on a countertop or a shelf of some sort.
Right.
And very likely close to a wall.
Okay.
Which is the worst place for them, in my opinion. In that sort of environment, like we tried this out in our kitchen, in the corner, exactly where we use the Bang & Olufsen balance.
Yeah.
And we also tested the little lunchbox A5. In comparison, the Era sounded boomy and small and just weird.
Yeah.
And I would rather listen to the Bang & Olufsen A5 or the balance.
Yeah.
And I definitely prefer the 7s over the Eras. I think that if you put the Eras on stands and you can give them some room to breathe, I think you're going to have a much better experience, like even a good one. Because I really liked them in stereo for music and movies, more so without the subwoofer.
Yeah, the bass with the 300s is pretty impressive. I know it only goes down to like 40-ish hertz, but it's a feel good 40, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know what a lot of people are going to say. Like, you should have gone with the bigger sub.
You should have got the donut.
Yeah, make the big crazy clown face with that. But listen, guys, we spent $1,400 of our own money to bring you this review. We just couldn't swing $800 for the big sub. So maybe it's different. I mean, we can't really say. If the crossover isn't adjustable,
and that's the thing is, I don't believe that it is.
Then it's not. You're going to still have the same experience.
Yeah.
Most likely. I mean,
most likely you're going to have deeper bass, but you're still Chris Pratt's voice, my voice. If you're watching this through a pair of Sonos speakers, it's coming out of the sub. It just is. And if that sub is closer to you, oh, that's jarring.
Now, where I'm not sold.
Okay.
Where I'm not sold
where
is
you're not sold.
is using them as rear surrounds.
Yeah.
That was a freaking mess. Look, if the Arc really is like 1,000 times better than the Beam, maybe then. But honestly, if I want a soundbar that gives me surrounds and Atmos and be great for music too, I'm going to buy the Samsung Q990, whatever letter they're on this today.
I know, it's B, C, D, who knows?
And just be done.
All right, guys, that is now our review of Sonos's new Era 300 smart speaker. What did you guys think? What do you think of our take? If you own this speaker, have you had similar difficulties, similar quirks? You were like, oh, I've noticed that too. Or did we get it completely wrong? But yeah, I want to know, because Sonos is such a force to be reckoned with. And I really enjoyed bringing you guys this review, as expensive as it was. Anyway, if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified. If you use any of the links Christy left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here. And we thank you all very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video, guys.